to start tonight with the race for Jacksonville Sheriff.
And that was an early call tonight for Republican TK Waters, who's now set to take over the sheriff's office for at least the next few months.
And he won with nearly 55% of the votes compared to Lakeisha Burton's 45%. On your sides, Zach Wilcox is at TK Waters' watch party tonight.
Yeah, Anthony, it's all quiet here now, but was anything but just a couple of hours ago when they announced that TK had won the race for sheriff, and he was all smiles as he worked his way up to the stage to give his acceptance speech. Talked about how Jacksonville is such a great city, it's his favorite city, and that he will not rest until everyone can live here safely. And he actually got a little emotional during his speech talking about his son Tommy. He dedicated the win to Tommy, talking about how Tommy told him when he was first promoted to assistant chief that he was going to make a great sheriff one day, and TK, thought that was a ways out in the making, but here we are, and it's been 31 years in the making, and despite all of that experience getting to this point, it's actually just a short term that Waters will be serving, at least initially here, only 6 months. So that's why when I got a second with him, I asked him, what can he really accomplish in just the next 6 months?
We're going to work on delivering, remapping our zones and where our manpower goes. I think that's very important. It hasn't been done in many, many years. And I think that's a very, very important thing for us to do. Logistically and how we put our people and where we assign them is very important.
And let's just take a quick look at the timeline here because it is fast. We're going to have 2 weeks here until TK is sworn in. Until then, Pat Ivey will remain sheriff. Then he will serve until July. However, there is another election in March, and he told me he will be back on that ballot. That will be for a full term when he will be running for re-election at that point. In San Marcos, Zach Wilcox, First Coast News, on your side.
Thank you, Zach. And Waters' challenger, Lakeisha Burton, told her supporters she will stay involved, and she felt inspired by the people she met during her campaign. On your side's Destiny McKeever was at her campaign event earlier tonight.
Well, Lakeisha Burton made her speech tonight on that stage at around 8 o'clock. She talked about two big things. She talked about what's next for her, if anything, and she also talked about what she did as soon as she found out TK Waters won the sheriff's race. Burton says she doesn't know what's next. She says she will go home and get rest before deciding what's next. And she also said she congratulated TK Waters on his win tonight and told him she would be there to help him however needed. Lakeisha Burton is no stranger to law enforcement, having served 24 years at JSO. She was once a zone commander and an assistant chief. Her campaign was run on change with a focus on Jacksonville's crime rate. Well, tonight she says she will continue bringing people together as she believes Jacksonville is politically divided.
What happened with my candidacy, it brought people together from diverse communities, and I think that is representative of, all of us at our core wanting the same thing. We want a safe community, so I'm just excited.
Lakeisha Burton making that speech at about 8 o'clock tonight. She did not again say whether or not she will be running again for that race that's coming up in March. Of course, we'll keep you updated with the very latest. Reporting from the South Bank, I'm Destiny McKeever, First Coast News on your side.
And we want to take a moment now and dive deeper into the Jacksonville Sheriff's race.
That's right. Let's send it over to Jeannie Blaylock, who's with our analyst tonight. Jeannie?
Well, let's start with John Dale. He's a professor of political science at UNF, and this is a very interesting question. Who ran the most TV ads in the sheriff's race in Jacksonville? And do you think that mattered?
Well, I do think it matters. That's one of the things I teach at UNF, and I think there was a big disparity. Their fundraising was actually a lot closer than the disparity in the amount of ads they ran, and I think TK ran a much more traditional race where he outspent Burton 5-1 on local TV in terms of political ads.
And let's talk now to Obi Umana, an attorney and political consultant. Now, Obi, Burton loses by 10 percentage points, and as we've been hearing, there's another election in March, and that will decide who's the sheriff for the next 4 years. Do you think that with this 10% gap that Burton should run again?
Well, listen, Chief Burton did a lot of things that you haven't seen from a Democratic candidate running citywide. A, she raised a good amount of money. B, she was able to pull from both sides of the aisle. And to be honest, she ran up against a red wave, right? And that affected the turnout for her. So she definitely should be back in the running if she decides to run again. She was the definitely the best candidate in the primary on the Democratic side. She shouldn't be so discouraged about what happened today.
All right, we appreciate you too. We'll talk to you again in a few minutes. Back over to you all.
Thank you so much. Now to the top two of the top races that we've been watching across the nation. The first, the race for governor here in Florida.
Governor Ron DeSantis declared the winner as the polls officially closed.
Now, Governor DeSantis brought in nearly 60% of the vote against his challenger, former Governor Charlie Crist. Let's head over to On Your Side's Rich Donnelly, who has been in Tampa tonight at the governor's watch party, Governor DeSantis' watch party. Rich?
The party continues here in Tampa at the Ron DeSantis victory celebration, and during the campaign, the governor ran ads saying that he would continue to fight and take on all comers. During his victory speech, he continued that theme.
We fight the woke in the legislature. We fight the woke in the schools. We fight the woke in the corporations. We will never, ever surrender to the woke mob. Florida is where woke is.
During a speech that often attacked Democratic lawmakers in Washington, D.C., the governor did take a moment to thank his wife for standing by his side.
Being a great wife, giving unwavering support, being a tremendous mother to our 3 young children, and serving as an example for women throughout this state, especially going through the battle of cancer. She is remarkable.
The governor said that when he first took office, he had a vision for the state of Florida, and he executed that vision. He also says that he plans on having better days ahead. Reporting in Tampa, Rich Donnelly, First Coast News, On Your Side.
And DeSantis' challenger, former Florida Governor Charlie Crist, thanked his supporters during his concession speech tonight, calling the people of Florida, quote, good, decent, and kind.
It's been an absolute blessing to serve as your governor before, to serve as the congressman from my hometown. I feel like the most blessed man ever. And Governor DeSantis, to you and your family, I wish you only the best. And I wish the best to my fellow Floridians.
So there is a lot to unpack with Governor DeSantis' re-election win tonight.
So let's head over to our analysts to break it all down for us.
Let me tell you something. This race really has our experts talking. I was watching them look at the results going, oh my goodness. Andrew Pentazzi has covered politics for years here. So what comes next for DeSantis? I mean, what would prevent him from announcing that he's running for president?
I mean, I think he needs to game out exactly how he's going to handle a potential primary against the former president, Donald Trump. But where he stands right now, winning by a nearly 20-point margin is really tremendous in a state like Florida, and it puts him on strong footing to be able to handle even a tough primary ahead.
And when can we expect an announcement from DeSantis? There's really no hurry for him, right?
Yeah, I don't think there's a hurry right now, especially given what we saw with the Florida legislature. He's now got supermajorities in the Florida House and Senate where he can pass any number of legislation to use to bolster his campaign ahead of time.
So, Obi, let's talk about Democrats versus Republicans. If you look back in recent governor's races in Florida, sometimes the winning margin, or you could say losing margin, has been super crazy tight, but not tonight. I mean, Crist loses by, what, 19%? So Democrats have got to be thinking, what can they do to fix this?
Well, clearly, when you have one of the biggest losses by a Democrat in 154 years, you definitely have the wrong person at the top of the ticket. What Democrats need to decide now are they're going to listen to their elite or they're going to listen to the grassroots organizers and people that have told them that Charlie Crist was not that person. Hopefully they bring in new leadership that will actually listen to their voters so they won't suffer a defeat like they did today.
So you're saying they need to get more grassroots and get off the elite then, right?
Right, they need to do that, but they also need to really sit down and listen to what their voters are asking them to do. I think what these Democratic consultants are telling them is only catering to certain people and not catering to their actual voters. And as you saw today, their voters stayed home.
And that was not a close election at all for governor. All right, thank you, too. We'll be talking with you all in just a more minute. And let's go back now to Anthony and Heather. Anthony?
And Jeannie, let's talk about the other local race for governor in Georgia.
So just coming into our newsroom at this late hour, Governor Brian Kemp now projected to win re-election after Stacey Abrams, his Democrat opponent, has just conceded the race to him. As of right now, Kemp has the lead with nearly 54% of the vote over Stacey Abrams' 45%.
Now to the race for U.S. Senate in Florida. In another quickly called race, Senator Marco Rubio won his re-election bid with nearly all of the ballots counted. Rubio has nearly 58% of the vote over Val Demings' 41%.
And on your sides, Taylor Levesque was with the Rubio campaign as the results came down in Senator Rubio's favor.
Rubio spoke to hundreds of his supporters with his family by his side here in Miami. He says he's grateful for re-election and to represent the state of Florida. He says his job is to protect the rights of people, and that's exactly what he plans to do.
The people in this country are going to vote for the people that fight for people like them. They're going to vote for people that are going to fight for people that care about being safe, that don't want drugs coming across our border, that don't want illegal immigration running rampant into our country, that don't want to have to pay $4 for gasoline, that don't want to have to pay 22% more than they used to for their groceries. So when you see the results across this country tonight, that's what it's all about.
Rubio went on to say that after tonight, the Republican Party will never be the same, and he is more energized and excited than ever before to work in the U.S. Senate. This will be his third term. In Miami, Taylor Levesque, First Coast News, on your side.
And Democratic Senate candidate Val Demings spoke to her supporters in Orlando, where she served as former police chief. And although she lost her race to Rubio tonight, she vowed to keep fighting and urged others to do the same for issues important to them.
We must look to our next fight to stand for the values we believe in and hold America to its promise of liberty and justice.
And this race between Senator Rubio and Val Demings was also a close one being watched across the nation.
So let's check back in with our analysts with a closer look at this race. Jeannie?
Yeah, let's dig into this just a bit more. So we're talking about Val Demings and her local roots. Wolfson High School, deep roots in Mandarin. Let's look at this graphic right here. This is not statewide numbers. This is Duval County today. She doesn't do well at all, 44.5% to Rubio, 54.2%. So John, how come? What happened?
Well, interesting parallels between Demings and Burton, both African-American female Democrat candidates, both Wolfson High grads. Both ended up with about 44% of Duval vote. I think they both made some strategic mistakes along the ways, but they also both suffered from a weakness at the top of the ticket that did not bring out African-American voters.
And so let's talk a little bit, Andrew, about a trend you've been noticing all evening here. Is there a trend of just voting straight down party lines and not really focusing on the candidate, or what are you seeing?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is more and more people are voting based on party. And so for the first time, you're really seeing not much difference no matter what race it is, whether it's the sheriff, the governor, attorney general, CFO, all these races coming in pretty similar. And it seems like voters are instead just saying, are you a D or are you an R? And since Democrats didn't turn out to vote today, that means it doesn't matter how good of a candidate you might have been down ballot or for the U.S. Senate, because the top of the ticket, the gubernatorial race, was not bringing people out to vote. People weren't voting. And so even in a place like Jacksonville, where Val Demings has such deep roots, she didn't do much better than Charlie Crist did here.
A lot of interesting things happened tonight, but this is midterm, not the presidential election. So we'll see what happens as we go on for the next couple of months. So back to you guys. Thank you so much for all your expertise tonight. Heather and Anthony.
All right, thank you, Jeannie. And now to the race for Senate in Georgia, where at this hour, the race just way too close to call.
As of now, it's a split down the middle, with both Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock pulling in 49% of the vote. You see those numbers here between us. At last check, less than 30,000 votes separate the two. We're also keeping a close eye on this race throughout the night.
And 3 proposed amendments on Florida's Constitution still up in the air at this hour. Amendment 1 would allow homeowners to flood-proof their homes without being taxed on those improvements. Amendment 2 would abolish the state's Constitutional Revision Commission. And then Amendment 3 would expand the homestead property exemption for first responders, teachers, and the military. Now, constitutional amendments must receive at least 60% of the vote in order to become law. None is above that threshold at this point.
Let's go to St. Johns County now. Voters there overwhelmingly rejecting a proposed sales tax, that 1 penny sales tax. The ballot amendment called for an additional 1% sales tax to finance nearly $500 million in county projects, including roads and parks. But 63% of voters said no to the idea, many expressing concerns that tax would subsidize developers and allow unchecked growth to continue. St. Johns County is the second fastest growing county in the state. And you can keep track of some of these too close to call races and other local results that we haven't covered on air by going to the First Coast News app and our website, firstcoastnews.com.
St. Johns County now calling for voluntary evacuation starting tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock. This as we prepare for what could become Hurricane Nicole.
That's right, because we are still taking a look at the weather tonight for what's to come this week. On your side, Jessica Clark. She is joining us tonight live with the latest. I can see it's windy there.
It is very windy. Good evening to you. We're along the St. Augustine Bayfront right by the Bridge of Lions, and you can see that the water is starting to splash against the seawall here. And, you know, it kind of feels like here we go again, right? I mean, it was just less than 2 months when we dealt with Ian, and now we're preparing for Nicole. You might remember during Ian, the bay came over the seawall and flooded the downtown area. Well, as you mentioned, this evening, city and county officials called for voluntary evacuations in low-lying areas starting at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then at 1 o'clock, 2 shelters will open, possibly more as time goes on, but for right now, 2 shelters. Just this evening, I was going around parts of downtown to check out what was going on, and I noticed several streets that typically flood when we have a king tide like we do now, or a nor'easter, which we have going now, have started to already flood. I contacted Tim Deegan. I said, check this out. He said, yeah, add 10 more inches on top of that, which is possibly what we could see. And we're dealing with a real issue here in St. Augustine yet again when it comes to flooding. This is what county officials had to say about evacuating.
Again, recommended evacuation, right? This is the time in the morning, and we don't want to alarm people, but we want to let them know, look, if you flooded during Ian, you're likely going to flood here in those low-lying areas. And so if you're living on Volano, if you're living in Summer Haven, if you're living in the city of St. Augustine, it's very likely that you're going to see some storm surge and some flooding. So now's the time to go out.
Now you might have a lot of questions about, well, am I in an evacuation zone? Should I evacuate? Where are the shelters? There is an information hotline for folks in St. Johns County to call. And you know what? It is manned by real living people. It's not an automated message. The number is 904-824-5550. Again, that is for an information hotline. But they have shut down for the night to get some rest, and then they start at 7 o'clock. That hotline opens at 7 o'clock in the morning, and then it will be nonstop until the hurricane or storm is over. Back out here live again along the bayfront in St. Augustine, where if we do see what we saw with Ian, the water will be almost to my thigh. We're live in St. Augustine. Jessica Clark, First Coast News, on your side.
Well, Jess, thanks. And she's talking about Ian versus Nicole. Remember, completely different angles of attack, and that matters, right? Because we've had several days already of the nor'easter trapping your tidal water. So we got the very latest cone. We are only about 4 miles an hour away from this becoming an official hurricane. Let's track that out. We'll get the very worst of the impacts as well for you right after this short break. Stay there.